In part 2 of my coverage on the Pamela Moss case, I talked not only about the manhunt but the subsequent arrest of landscaper James Robert Moore. Here in part 3, I pick back up with his confession. And when police arrived to his house on the day of his arrest, he said, "I thought you might be coming." According to Moore, he watched Pamela arrive home from school. He then watched her walk into the woods again towards Panorama Trail. A half hour later, he went into the woods at the back of Pamela's house and walked along the creek until it met up with the trail, and he waited. As Pamela made her way back, he stepped out from hiding on the path and he began walking next to her, talking about the beauty of the woods and the weather. He said she didn't really look at him and gave polite one-word answers. Then, as he noticed a house in the distance, he realized it was now or never. He grabbed her around the waist and put his hand over her mouth. He said the two struggled and went down an embankment, and he put his arm on her throat where she simply said the word, "Please." According to Moore, after this, he put her over his shoulder and walked her deeper into the woods where he assaulted her, and then he left her there temporarily. He then went back to the house he was working at, picked up his landscaping supplies, and put them in his Jeep. He then drove back down the trail and put Pamela in the back. He cut down some shrubs and placed them on top of her to conceal her body since the back was open. He added that he accidentally hit his horn while driving down there, and he was worried someone would notice. His Jeep also got stuck in the mud for a moment, and he said that he would have been caught if not for his four-wheel drive. He said he then pulled back out, and 3 cars passed him as he waited to turn onto the main road, one a woman he was sure could identify him. By happenstance, he found the second dirt road that led to the gravel pit. He then put Pamela over his shoulder and walked towards a bluff, down a gully, and up a bank. I'll read the next part directly from his statement. He said, quote, "I followed to where I could see the water. I started down. It was so steep I couldn't maintain my footing. I dropped her to the ground and dragged her by the wrists. I could hear men working at the south end of the pond. I used the cover provided by trees and brush until I got down to the dirt road along the side of the water. On the way down, one of her tennis shoes fell off, and then the other one fell off, and her shorts and pants came off. I found an opening in the weeds and pulled her across the last gully, up an embankment, and pushed her into the water with my foot." He then went on to say he found one of her shoes, put a stick in it, and tossed it up with some of her other clothes. He then said in his statement, quote, "I was exhausted. I kept going somehow and got to the top of the bluff and ran to my Jeep. I headed out onto Panorama Trail. No cars were in sight." According to his statement, after this, he drove home and briefly spoke to his wife. He then went down and stripped his clothes in the basement. He played the part of the helpful husband to his pregnant wife and told her, "I'll run the wash through." And he put his family laundry in with the clothes he just wore in the killing of a young girl. He recalled sitting down to dinner with his family, but not being very hungry. He then told his wife he needed to stop at a few customer homes, and he did so. He arrived home at around 9 p.m. and tossed his boots into a neighbor's bonfire. He still had Pamela's purse in his car, the one her mom knew right away was missing. He went out to Durandysman Park the next day and dumped it before getting paranoid that someone would find it, and so he went back and buried it and covered it with leaves. After his confession, he led police to it, removing any lingering doubt that he was the real killer. I mentioned that he also confessed to the Cobb's Hill crime, but that wasn't all. He also mentioned assaults in other parks and said that he, by his own count, had roughly 50 SAs throughout his life in Buffalo and Rochester before and after he was married. Neighbors who lived next door to Moore said he was an involved father and really friendly with neighborhood kids. One neighbor even talked to him about the case in the days after, and they both talked about how awful a person must have been to commit a crime like that. Moore also continued gardening work on Sawmill Drive in the days after. He spoke to one woman who mentioned the crime and said that such a crime kind of makes a person sick, and he responded, "It sure does." Moore was indicted in October of 1962 on first-degree murder charges, which is, at the time, New York State still had the death penalty, and people who faced that charge also faced a mandatory death sentence if convicted. Moore initially pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and the judge had him undergo a mental evaluation. In the meantime, his legal counsel quit because of a conflict with Moore, and he was granted that. In December of 62, he was found competent to stand trial by a Rochester psychiatric hospital, and he and his new attorney, pushed back on this. In January of 63, just before his next hearing, he tried to unalive himself with sleeping pills, but he survived. They tried to get the trial moved out of Monroe County, and that was denied, and ultimately they realized this case was not going to go well for Moore if it went to trial. Pamela Moss's family was a devout Catholic family who did not believe in the death penalty. As such, as plea negotiations began, their only feedback was that if he pleaded guilty, that he not be sentenced to death, but instead that he would be never allowed the chance at parole. Those terms were agreed upon, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Unfortunately, the path to justice was far from over for the Moss family, and little did they know they would be entering a multi-decade battle with James Moore. I'll get into that and all of the aftermath in the final installment of my coverage of this case in part 4, so go check it out now.